What if the most important voyage in history never happened? What if one small, extremely irresponsible wizard decided that Christopher Columbus should absolutely not sail west in 1492? This is the story of how one meddling old man in a pointy hat accidentally kept 2 entire continents hidden from the world. The year is 1491. Christopher Columbus, a stubborn Italian sailor with a very big dream and a very bad sense of direction, was desperately trying to find someone to fund his voyage west. He had already been rejected by Portugal twice. He had been rejected by England. He had been rejected by France. At this point, even his own mother was skeptical. Finally, Queen Isabella of Spain said yes. She gave Columbus 3 ships, some confused sailors, and her blessing to go find a shortcut to Asia. Columbus was thrilled. He immediately began preparing his fleet at the port of Palos. Everything was going perfectly according to plan. And then the wizard appeared. He stepped out of a glowing portal right onto the dock, looked at Columbus's 3 ships, looked at Columbus and said, "Absolutely not." Columbus stared at this strange old man in a blue robe, blocking his gangplank. "Who are you?" "Someone who has seen how this ends." "How does it end?" The wizard went very quiet. The wizard refused to explain further. Instead, he snapped his fingers, and an enormous magical storm appeared directly in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, permanently blocking all western sea routes. Columbus tried to sail around it. The storm moved. He tried again. The storm moved again. He tried 17 more times. The storm was very committed. Eventually, Columbus gave up, went home, and spent the rest of his life very confused and extremely bitter about a storm that seemed personally targeted at him. And just like that, America was never discovered, at least not by Europe. Not yet. The wizard dusted off his hands, stepped back through his portal, and said, "Problem solved." He had absolutely no idea what he had just broken. Without the discovery of America, Spain never got its hands on mountains of American gold and silver. The Spanish Empire never became the most powerful force in the world. Portugal, which had been racing Spain to find new trade routes, suddenly found itself with no competition. Portugal became extremely smug about this. England, which had been planning to eventually colonize the New World, suddenly had nowhere to send all its criminals, religious dissidents, and people who were simply too annoying to keep around. England solved this problem by sending them all to Scotland. Scotland was not happy about this. Meanwhile, in the Ottoman Empire, trade through the Silk Road continued booming. The Ottomans had no reason to weaken. The Ottoman Empire just kept growing and growing and growing. Europe, without American gold flooding in, stayed relatively poor. The Renaissance slowed down significantly. Several famous artists ran out of funding and had to get real jobs. Michelangelo became a ceiling painter. Just regular ceilings. Nothing special. Very flat. Very boring. He was miserable. Back in the actual Americas, the Aztec Empire was thriving. No Spanish conquistadors meant no smallpox, no invasion, no destruction. The Aztecs were doing extremely well. The Inca Empire in South America was also flourishing. They built more roads, more cities, and continued their incredibly impressive mountain architecture completely undisturbed. The indigenous peoples of North America continued their civilizations peacefully, developing trade networks, agriculture, and complex societies across the continent without interruption. The wizard reappeared somewhere in 1550 to check on things. He looked at thriving Americas, stable indigenous civilizations, and an uncolonized continent. He nodded approvingly. Perfect. He then looked at Europe. Poorer, slower, more crowded, fighting over the same old trade routes, slightly behind where it should be. He nodded less approvingly. He then looked at the Ottoman Empire, now so large and powerful it controlled everything from Morocco to Persia. He stopped nodding entirely. Without competition from American silver, the Ottoman economy dominated global trade completely. Every European nation paid enormous tolls just to move goods eastward. Europe was basically the Ottoman Empire's customer service department. The Ottoman Sultan looked at his empire in the year 1600 and said, "Things are going extremely well." His advisors agreed. His enemies agreed. Everyone agreed. Nobody was happy about agreeing. In Asia, China's Ming dynasty had no reason to pull back from exploration. Without European competition in the seas, Chinese fleets expanded their reach across Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean. Japan, watching China expand, decided it should also expand. This created a very tense situation in the Pacific that several wizards from the future would later describe as completely avoidable. Back in Europe, England was getting desperate, overcrowded, underfunded, and increasingly annoyed at paying Ottoman trade tolls. English sailors began looking for any alternative route anywhere. An English captain named Thomas Briefly, who history completely forgot about because nothing he did mattered, attempted to sail north over the top of the world to reach Asia. He found only ice, an enormous amount of ice. "There is nothing up here," Thomas briefly reported back to England. "Just ice and suffering." England found this very relatable. Then in 1612, a different storm, not the WIZZARD's storm, a real storm. A Spanish fishing vessel, blown wildly off course, somehow survived the WIZZARD's magical Atlantic barrier and crashed onto the shores of what we would call Florida. The surviving sailors stumbled onto the beach, looked around at the lush green landscape, the warm sunshine, the incredible birds, the abundance of food, and immediately sent word back to Spain. "You will not believe what we found." The WIZZARD, who had been napping somewhere in the 15th century, was immediately alerted by his magical early warning system. He arrived back at the Atlantic barrier to find a large hole in it. "Oh no," said the WIZZARD. Spain mobilized its fleet within a year. The WIZZARD tried to rebuild his storm barrier, but it was too late. 300 Spanish ships were already crossing the Atlantic, carrying soldiers, priests, and an absolutely staggering quantity of flags to plant in things. The Aztec emperor looked at the horizon one morning and saw 300 sails approaching. He turned to his advisor. "Are those clouds?" "No, Your Majesty." "Are those birds?" "No, Your Majesty." "Are those?" "Yes, Your Majesty." But this time, something was different. The Aztecs had an extra 120 years of development. They had iron tools, stronger fortifications, larger armies, and critically, they had seen what happened to other civilizations when strangers arrived with flags. The Spanish landing did not go as smoothly as it did in the original timeline. The first wave of conquistadors was sent back to their ships fairly quickly and firmly. The Spanish regrouped, sent more ships. The Aztecs sent messengers to every other civilization on the continent. The strangers are back. They brought more flags. The WIZZARD watched from a cliff above Florida as the two worlds finally collided a century later than they should have, slightly more equally matched than before, and thought to himself, "Well, I bought them some time at least." He paused. "That will have to be enough." It was not enough, but it was something.